The Empire had ruled the Andromeda sector for 12,000 years. Their ships numbered in the millions. Their weapons could crack planets in half. Their soldiers had conquered over 300 species across the galaxy. Nobody questioned their power. Nobody dared to challenge their authority. They believed themselves to be gods walking among lesser creatures. When their scouts first discovered humanity, the High Council laughed. These small, soft creatures lived on a single blue planet in a forgotten corner of the Milky Way. They had only recently learned to travel between stars. Their ships were slow. Their weapons were primitive. Their population was tiny compared to the endless billions that served the Empire. The High Council decided that humanity was not worth their attention. They marked Earth and its few dozen colonies as future conquest targets and moved on to more pressing matters. For 50 years, they ignored the humans completely. This was their first mistake. During those 50 years, humanity changed. They spread across hundreds of star systems. They built massive shipyards on the moons of gas giants. They developed new weapons that their scientists had only dreamed about. Most importantly, they learned that they were not alone in the universe, and they prepared for the day when strangers would come knocking at their door. The humans found ancient ruins on dead worlds. They discovered the remains of civilizations that they had destroyed thousands of years ago. They read the warnings carved into stone by dying species. They understood what was coming, and they got ready. They finally turned their attention back to humanity when a small human trading ship accidentally entered space. The ship was carrying medical supplies to a remote colony. It had made a navigation error. The captain immediately apologized and requested permission to leave peacefully. The response was brutal. They captured the ship. They tortured the crew for information about human defenses. Then they broadcast the executions across all frequencies as a warning to other species. They expected humanity to surrender in fear. They expected begging and pleading. Instead, they received silence. This silence worried some of the younger commanders. They suggested caution. They recommended sending scouts to assess human military strength before taking further action. The High Council dismissed these concerns with contempt. What could these primitive creatures possibly do against the greatest empire in galactic history? The High Council decided to make an example of humanity. They would destroy one human colony as a demonstration of power. This would force the humans to surrender without requiring a full invasion. It would be quick, efficient, and terrifying. They chose a small mining colony called New Helsinki on the edge of human space. New Helsinki was home to 40,000 people, miners and their families, engineers and teachers, children who had never seen Earth. They lived simple lives, extracting rare minerals from the asteroid belt surrounding their station. They had a small defense force of 12 ships. They posed no threat to anyone. The attack fleet arrived without warning. 200 warships surrounded the tiny colony. The commander offered the colonists one chance to evacuate. He gave them 6 hours to abandon their homes and flee into space. Many families tried to escape on transport ships. They destroyed every ship that attempted to leave. Then they began bombarding the colony. The attack lasted for 3 days. When it ended, nothing remained of New Helsinki except dust and debris. 40,000 humans died screaming in the void of space. They recorded everything and sent the footage to Earth as a gift. They expected surrender within the week. 1 month passed with no response from humanity. 2 months, 3 months. They grew confused. Their intelligence officers reported strange movements in human space. Ships were gathering. Factories were running at maximum capacity. Billions of humans were volunteering for military service. Something was happening, but they could not understand what. The human response came exactly 1 year after the destruction of New Helsinki. It came not as a message or a negotiation. It came as fire and fury unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The humans attacked simultaneously across 17 different systems. Their ships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Their weapons fired before the defenders could even raise shields. Colony after colony fell in the first hour of the assault. The commanders were stunned. The human ships were not supposed to be this fast. Human weapons were not supposed to be this powerful. Human tactics were not supposed to be this coordinated. Everything they knew about humanity was wrong. The humans had spent the past 50 years preparing for exactly this moment. They had developed weapons in secret. They had built ships in hidden shipyards deep in asteroid belts. They had trained millions of soldiers in underground facilities on frozen moons. They had created an army specifically designed to fight the. Their scientists had studied technology from the ancient ruins. They had learned its weaknesses. They had designed weapons that could pierce armor like paper. They had developed shields that could absorb energy blasts. They had created viruses that could shut down computer systems in seconds. The first wave of attacks destroyed over 600 warships. The second wave disabled their communication networks. The third wave targeted their supply lines and fuel depots. Within 1 week, the forces in the border regions were completely isolated and helpless. The High Council finally understood their mistake. They had not conquered a primitive species. They had awakened a sleeping giant. They had given humanity a reason to fight. And humans fought with a fury that terrified even the most experienced warriors. The Council ordered a full military mobilization. Every ship in the Empire was called to battle. Every soldier was armed and deployed. Every factory switched to wartime production. They would crush these upstart humans with overwhelming force. They would teach them the price of defiance. The Great Armada gathered in the Nexus system. 8 million warships, the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history, enough firepower to destroy 1,000 civilizations. The fleet commanders were confident. No species could stand against such power. The human fleet that arrived to meet them numbered only 200,000 ships. They laughed at this pathetic force. They ordered their ships to attack. They expected an easy victory. The battle lasted for 6 days. When it ended, the Armada no longer existed. The humans did not fight like any species they had encountered before. They did not form neat battle lines. They did not follow predictable patterns. They swarmed like angry insects. They attacked from every direction simultaneously. They sacrificed ships without hesitation to destroy larger targets. Human pilots flew suicide missions into command ships. Human Marines boarded enemy vessels and fought hand-to-hand in corridors filled with smoke and blood. Human engineers overloaded reactors and turned their own ships into weapons. They fought with a desperation and savagery that they could not comprehend. They had never encountered a species that simply refused to die. Every time they destroyed a human ship, 2 more appeared. Every time they killed a human soldier, 10 more volunteered to take their place. The humans kept coming and coming and coming until they had nothing left to throw at them. After the Battle of the Nexus, the Empire began to collapse. Systems that had been loyal for thousands of years declared independence. Species that had been enslaved for generations rose up in rebellion. The fear that had held the Empire together disappeared when the humans proved that they could be defeated. The human advance was relentless. They did not stop to negotiate. They did not accept surrender. For every colony they liberated, they found evidence of atrocities, mass graves, torture facilities, entire species reduced to slavery. The humans had entered the war seeking revenge. Now they sought justice. The OV Prime was a fortress planet. Orbital defense platforms surrounded it in layers. Planetary shields protected its surface. Underground bunkers sheltered its population. The High Council believed it was impregnable. They believed they could hold out for centuries. The humans reached Prime 18 months after the war began. They did not attempt to breach the planetary defenses. Instead, they did something they had never considered possible. They redirected asteroids from the outer system and sent them hurtling toward the planet at incredible speed. The first asteroid struck Prime on a Tuesday morning. The impact killed 300 million instantly. The shockwave destroyed cities on the opposite side of the planet. Dust clouds blocked out the sun and triggered a nuclear winter that would last for decades. The second asteroid hit 2 days later. The third hit the day after that. By the end of the week, Prime was a dead world. The 12,000-year-old civilization ended not with a battle, but with rocks falling from the sky. The surviving scattered across the galaxy. Some surrendered and faced human justice. Others fled to the edges of known space and disappeared. A few tried to continue fighting, but without and leadership, their resistance crumbled within months. The human victory shocked every species in the galaxy. Civilizations that had lived in fear of the force suddenly found themselves free. Refugees who had fled conquest returned to their ancestral worlds. New governments formed. New alliances emerged. The balance of power shifted permanently. Humanity did not seek to replace the as galactic conquerors. They had no interest in ruling over other species. They wanted only to be left alone to live their lives in peace. They established defensive borders around their territory and warned all species that any attack on human civilians would be met with absolute destruction. The message was clear. Humanity would not start wars, but they would finish them. The ruins of New Helsinki became a memorial. Every year, humans gathered there to remember the 40,000 who died. They came to honor the sacrifice that had unified their species. They came to remind themselves why they must always be ready to fight. The lesson of the spread through every corner of the galaxy. It passed from species to species as a warning. Do not attack humanity. Do not threaten their children. Do not mistake their kindness for weakness. They are slow to anger but terrible in their wrath. 300 years after the war, a young refugee asked his grandfather why their empire had fallen. The old was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke words that would echo through history. They targeted one colony, just one small colony of 40,000 souls, and for that crime humanity erased us from existence. We thought we were teaching them fear. Instead, we taught them that we could never be allowed to exist. We made ourselves their enemy, and humans do not leave enemies standing. The galaxy remembers this lesson. When new species rise and look toward human space with hungry eyes, their elders pull them aside and tell them the story of the. They point to the dead world of Prime and the memorial at New Helsinki. They explain what happens when you give humanity a reason to fight. And the young ones listen. They always listen. Because somewhere in the darkness between stars, human ships are watching, waiting, ready to remind the galaxy why some sleeping giants should never be awakened.